Welcome to the rose garden again. However, today we're not going to talk about the flowers that abound, but instead we're going to talk about the green grass under my feet. This is the green that sets off all the flowers. This is the green that sets off your home. It's the green that your children play on, that your pets enjoy, and that you can entertain. Today we're going to talk about a few little helpful hints so that you too can have a green lawn that's the envy of the neighborhood. I would tell you that the first and foremost thing to have when you have a lawn is to have sun. We are blessed with many mature trees here in Farmers Branch, and I get a number of phone calls from people wanting to know what kind of grass to grow under the trees. Well, unless that area gets a minimum of 4 hours of direct sun a day, grass is not the plant for you to use. You need to find another alternative ground cover, and we'll talk about that in another program. But let's assume you've got good sun. If you only have those 4 hours of sun, probably your turf of choice is going to be St. Augustine or even a zoysia. If you're going to grow Bermuda, you want even more sun than that. And Bermuda is a great hardy turf for our area, probably the hardiest of all of them in terms of repair and in terms of cold hardiness. Another possibility that gets a lot of press these days is buffalo grass. And buffalo grass is a great full sun grass that tolerates or will survive with very little water. So that's another possibility. But if you're going to grow buffalo grass, and we're not going to really talk about that today, you want to treat it as buffalo grass and don't feed it as much and don't water it as much so that it will thrive without encouraging the other grasses to come in and take it over. So let's go back to the St. Augustine and to the Bermuda grass. A common question is how much water does it need? On average, you need about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water per week. Now that includes rainfall. So if we get a good rain, make sure you subtract that amount. And if you're saying, well, how do I know how much water am I putting down when I'm irrigating? Then get some tuna cans or some cat food cans and sort of space them around the yard. Put them near your sprinklers, put them in the middle, space them around, let your sprinklers run for about 20 to 30 minutes, time it, and then go check the water in your cans. Take an average, and that will let you know about how much water you're putting out in a given time using your irrigation system. You'll find that it takes a little while to put that amount out. You're also going to find that because of our clay soil, that before you get 1 inch of water down, you're going to have runoff. And that runoff is just going down the street into the storm gutters, and it's not being an effective water for your turf. So what you want to do is you want to water in smaller increments. Say you're going to water 15 minutes at a time so that water can soak into the ground, and then you let it sit for a minute, no more than a minute, probably a half hour or so, and then you water again. That way all the water you're putting on your lawn is actually going into your lawn. It's always a great idea if you have an automatic irrigation system to at least monthly go out and run that system during the day. Check each station and make sure you don't have any blown heads, clogged nozzles, cattywampus heads. Just go and make sure that everything is in the ground as it was designed to be so that your system is efficient. So after you water, the next most important thing is mowing. If I had to pick one cultural practice that's going to determine the quality of your turf, I'm going to tell you it's mowing. I see a lot of people are not real fond of mowing, and they'll think, well, maybe I'll just mow every 2 weeks. Well, what happens is that, let's say your grass grew like that, and you're wanting it to grow, you want it to maintain it about right here. Well, you're cutting off at least half of that growth. And every time you cut off half of a plant's growth, you're going to shock it. So the plant's got to regroup. Whereas if you were to mow every week, you would only be mowing about this much and taking that off, and so you'd be taking about 1/3 of the leaf surface away. The turf will respond much better. Also, by mowing regularly, you encourage lateral growth, and that lateral growth will make your turf dense. And that is by far the best defense against weeds. If you have a good, strong, dense turf, you will have very few, if any, weeds. So that's what I would recommend, is to mow weekly. And if you got it in you, even every 5 days. Think about the golf courses. They're mowing out there the greens every day. They're mowing the fairways probably 2 to 3 times a week, and I promise you those roughs are getting hit at least once, if not twice. That's what helps them have that good dense turf. It also takes way less time to mow more frequently because you're not fighting it. You're just having a nice stroll in the park, so to say. Another thing, if you'll notice on this mower, we have no bag. I believe very firmly that we should not be bagging our clippings. By mowing frequently and having small pieces of grass, you will be returning that grass to the turf area. It will break down. It's going to break down and it's going to return those nutrients to the turf, to the soil. It provides organic matter, and we all know organic matter is the best thing for our clay soils here. So, mow frequently, no bagging, and I think you will see a marked improvement in your turf. As to the height of cut, if you're growing Bermuda grass, you're going to cut it at about 3/4 to 1.5 inches. If you're growing St. Augustine, typically you're going to mow it from about 1.5 inches to 3 inches. If you have a blend, and there is nothing wrong with the blend. I find that some years are good Bermuda years and some years are good St. Augustine. I personally have a blend, and I watch the ebb and flow of which is the stronger grass in my turf, and it works out great. And I'm not hurt when we have a year that's better for one variety over the other. So pick the correct mowing height and mow frequently. Fertilizer. Here in our soils, we have a lot of phosphorus that is natural. So I would encourage you to get a fertilizer that is low in phosphorus. I also believe that having a slow release or an organic fertilizer is better for the turf. You know, there are some products out there, say a 2100, that you can put down, and in 2 or 3 days that grass is super green and growing super fast. But that's just like us taking and eating that chocolate candy bar and getting that immediate rush. It feels good for a short period of time, but it doesn't sustain us for the long period. So you'll have a real high rate of growth, and then it drops way down, and then it goes high and drops way down. Whereas if you use an organic fertilizer or a slow release, you're going to find a more even release of nutrients and therefore a more even growth pattern of your turf, and I think you'll be much happier. So I said phosphorus, and probably you're thinking, well, how do I know what the phosphorus is? Well, your fertilizers are going to have 3 numbers on it. This particular one is a 6-2-4, and that's a ratio. That's saying that 6% of this bag is nitrogen, which is the first number. The second number is phosphorus. It's saying that 2% is phosphorus, and the last number is potash, and that's 4%. Potash is kind of what I call a stressalizer. It's kind of what gives those roots and that plant the extra oomph to handle whatever stresses are thrown its way. Phosphorus is typically used to produce blooms, obviously not so important with a turf. And the first number is nitrogen. And nitrogen is very important in our turf grass maintenance. It's also it also differs from the other 2 components in that it's very water soluble and it doesn't hang around in our soil long. And that's why we have to continually add it. We're continually adding it when we're leaving our grass clippings on the turf, and we will also be adding it when we put it on with a fertilizer. Over the course of the year, you want to put down about 2 to 4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and that's a general ballpark for a healthy turf that you're not trying to make look like a golf fairway, okay? The other thing that I think is important, that it be a complete fertilizer and have some micronutrients. This particular one also has iron in it. Our soils are very alkaline, and the iron that is there tends to be tied up. I think it's always a good thing to add iron. Sulfur is another good one. Because this particular fertilizer is organic, you're going to see this whole menu down here of stuff that I say is good stuff, mainly for the soil. But It all starts with the soil. If you have good, healthy soil in terms of microbial activity, you're pretty much going to have a good, healthy turf. So you want to fertilize 3 to 4 times a year. You notice that I'm using straight fertilizer here, no weed and feed. Repeat after me, no weed and feed, especially that's a post-emergent, which means you're killing the weed after it's already up. That weed killer doesn't know the difference between that holly bush and that broadleaf weed in your yard. I've seen too much damage caused by using weed and feed. Please don't use that. Let's see, other practices. You probably have noticed this big green machine over here. This is called an air fryer. I know that in my own yard at home, I have a dog, and my dog wants to run in the same path every single day. And out here in the garden, along our main pathway, that's where most of the people walk back and forth every day. All of that foot traffic results in a compaction of the soil. And when our soil gets compacted, it reduces the amount of airspace. Reducing the amount of airspace reduces the amount of oxygen, gas exchange that can happen. It also reduces the amount of water that can penetrate that soil in a given amount of time. So we want to aerify. And what this guy does is it sort of has a spoon tine on it, and it goes in and it pulls out little chunks of soil that opens up that soil. And what will happen is those little chunks of soil will sit on top of your turf. You'll run the mower over it a couple times, you'll water it, it will melt, and that soil is now loose. So if you have a heavily compacted area, I would suggest that you do this several times the first year, and then probably annually thereafter. The other important thing to do before you put this machine out is to mark your sprinkler heads. This can do a number on your head, so you want to mark your sprinkler heads so that you protect them, and when it's all said and done, you fertilize, you can water it without having to do a lot of repair. I hope I've given you some tips today to get that green, healthy lawn. Remember, the most important cultural thing you can do is to mow on a regular basis. Keep that plant from going into shock by cutting off more than 1/3 of the blade at a time. I'll see you again in the garden, and I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you.